from the beginning to infinity, the quest for truth. Throughout history, the human mind has developed numerous philosophies in its pursuit of truth. However, some philosophies go beyond mere intellectual thought. They attempt to reveal fundamental existential truths. One such extraordinary and ancient philosophy is Sankhya Darshan. The philosophy we are discussing today is not just a logical system of thought, but a divine knowledge that unveils the mysteries of creation, the soul, and nature. This is the same great philosophy whose founder is none other than Maharishi Kapila Muni, an enlightened sage worshipped by the Saptarishis and an incarnation of Lord Vishnu himself. The Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranas mention him as the revealer of cosmic mysteries. The original scriptures of Sankhya Darshan are either lost or remain undiscovered. However, its divine teachings are still preserved in the Karika written by Ishwar Krishna, which is considered an authoritative text on Sankhya philosophy. It is not just a philosophy, but a radiant light of self-knowledge that provides an unparalleled path of reasoning, intellect, and wisdom to understand the mysteries of Prakriti, nature, and Purusha, consciousness. Today, we will delve deep into this profound subject and explore whether this philosophy is merely an intellectual pursuit or a scientific foundation for the quest for truth. Do modern scientific discoveries validate the principles of Sankhya philosophy? Is the relationship between the soul and nature the same as what modern quantum physics is exploring today? Is Sankhya merely an atheistic ideology? Or is it the ultimate path of spirituality and knowledge that unveils the deepest truths of life and the universe? To uncover these mysteries, watch this video until the end and join us on this divine journey, one that will not only provide knowledge, but also guide you on the path of self-realization. For those who wish to deeply understand Sankhya Darshan, we have included a section with important questions that are frequently asked in civil services, UGC NET, QET PG, and other competitive exams. The answers will be simple, clear, and logical, making them easy to understand and useful for your studies. Sankhya Darshan is a treasure of Indian philosophical thought, not just a game of ideas, but an effort to reveal the fundamental truths of life. Its origin is not merely the result of human reasoning, but is deeply rooted in cosmic consciousness itself. When creation began, there was not just emptiness, but a divine vibration of sound. This vibration became the first indication of existence, which the sages absorbed. This sound was no ordinary sound. It was the very foundation from which all material and spiritual energy emerged. It was the same sound that later came to be known as Omkar, Om, and is regarded as the primal source of the universe. Those who heard this cosmic sound were of three types. 1. Some merely heard it and moved on. 2. Some attempted to understand it but could not grasp its depth. 3. And a few not only experienced it but also expressed it. These were the sages who preserved this knowledge in the Vedas and Upanishads. The Vedic concept of Shruti, that which is heard, reveals this very mystery. Shruti refers to knowledge that flowed directly from the cosmos and was received by sages through deep meditation and spiritual practice. It was not a product of human imagination, but a divine realization attained in the deepest states of contemplation. When the sages absorbed this knowledge, they expressed it in the form of Vedic hymns, which were later compiled into the Vedas. Just as radio waves are already present in the universe, but can only be heard when the right equipment captures them, the knowledge of the Vedas existed even before it was written down. It only needed to be heard and understood. The sages, through their deep meditation and yogic practices, heard this divine, unstruck sound, Anahata Nad, which later manifested in the hymns of the Vedas. This knowledge was in no way human-made. Rather, it was a cosmic truth, accessible only in the highest state of consciousness. The connection between Sankhya Darshan and the Vedas is deeply rooted in the Shruti, heard tradition. The Rig Veda mentions the dualism of Prakriti, nature, and Purusha, consciousness, explaining that the universe is formed by the union of these two elements one that is unchanging, immutable, and eternal, Purusha, and the other that is constantly undergoing creation, destruction, and transformation, Prakriti. This duality governs all events and fundamental laws of existence. Maharishi Kapila was a direct seer of this cosmic truth. Born into a highly revered lineage of sages, his mother Devahuti was the daughter of a great king, and his father Rishi Kardama was a highly accomplished yogi. When Devahuti, through her penance and devotion, sought a divine child, Lord Vishnu himself incarnated as her son, who later became known as Maharishi Kapila. From early childhood, Kapila exhibited extraordinary wisdom. He did not become a disciple of any guru because he had already attained self-realization. He possessed deep insight into the illusory nature of the world, the purity of the soul, and the mysteries of nature. Renouncing worldly attachments, he devoted himself to self-realization and dedicated his knowledge to the welfare of humanity. Maharishi Kapila is considered one of the greatest sages of Indian philosophy, not just an enlightened thinker, but a self-realized seer who directly experienced and revealed the truths of the soul, nature, and the cosmos through Sankhya Darshan. The Sankhya philosophy taught by Maharishi Kapila is one of the 6 major schools of Indian philosophy. However, Sankhya is not just a philosophical system. It is a deep spiritual realization that introduces a person to their true nature. It asserts that the entire creation is a result of the union between Purusha, pure consciousness, and Prakriti, matter energy. Purusha is pure awareness. Uninvolved in any action or transformation, it is merely a witness. Prakriti is active and dynamic, constantly engaged in creation, transformation, and dissolution. Everything the universe is bound by the 3 Gunas, qualities, of Prakriti, Sattva, balance, purity, Rajas, activity, passion, and Tamas, inertia, ignorance. Purusha, however, is beyond these qualities. When a person realizes this distinction, they attain the ultimate purpose of life. They understand that they are not the body, not the mind, not the senses, nor this material world. They are pure consciousness that can transcend the bondage of nature and remain established in its own true essence. Maharishi Kapila structured this knowledge into Sankhya Darshan, defining 25 fundamental principles, tattvas, that explain the interrelation between Purusha and Prakriti. According to Sankhya, Purusha is independent, the knower and the ultimate witness. Prakriti is active. The material world operates through its 3 gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. All human experiences are governed by the fluctuations of these gunas. When a person attains knowledge of this truth, they become liberated, moksha. The impact of Sankhya philosophy was not limited to India. Over time, Patanjali developed it further in yoga philosophy. Vyas expanded upon it in the Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. Even Buddhist and Jain traditions incorporated its principles. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna clearly states that one who understands the reality of the world through Sankhya and Yoga is liberated from the cycle of birth and death. He teaches Arjuna that the soul is eternal and indestructible, while the body is merely a temporary vessel. This is the essence of Sankhya. Everything that is born will perish, but that which is eternal can never be destroyed. Sankhya is not merely a philosophical doctrine. It is also a scientific method for understanding life. Modern science is in pursuit of the same truth, that matter and energy are 2 forms of the same essence. Science states that the universe is composed of vibrations of energy, and Sankhya asserts that the entire creation is constituted by the 3 fundamental qualities, gunas, of Prakriti. This philosophy teaches us that while living in the world, one should not become entangled in it. One who truly understands this remains liberated, irrespective of place or circumstance, because they have realized that their true self is beyond this world. Sankhya Darshan is a remarkable achievement of Indian philosophical thought. It is not merely intellectual speculation, but an attempt to reveal the true nature of existence. It did not originate from the ideas of any individual. Rather, its roots lie in the cosmic truth itself. When creation began, there was not mere void, but a divine vibration. This vibration was the first sign of existence, which the ancient sages perceived. This was the same primordial sound, later known as Om, which is considered the fundamental energy of the cosmos. Among those who perceived this cosmic vibration, there were three types of people. 1. Some merely heard it and moved on. 2. Some attempted to understand it but could not grasp its depth. 3. A select few not only experienced it but also expressed it. These were the rishis, who preserved this knowledge in the Vedas and Upanishads. The Vedic concept of Shruti embodies this mystery. The word Shruti literally means that which was heard, signifying knowledge that emanated from the universe itself and was received by the sages through deep meditation and spiritual practice. It was not a product of human imagination, but a divine revelation attained in the deepest states of meditation. Once the sages internalized this wisdom, they articulated it in Vedic hymns, which were later compiled into the Vedas. Just as radio waves exist in the universe, but can only be heard when the appropriate receiver captures them, the wisdom of the Vedas existed even before it was written down. It merely needed to be heard and understood. The rishis, through their meditative absorption and yogic discipline, perceived this anahata nad, unstruck celestial sound, which was later expressed in the Vedic hymns. This knowledge was not created by humans. Rather, it was a grace of cosmic truth, attainable only in the highest state of consciousness. The Shvetashvatra Upanishad elucidates this duality, Dvaita, further, stating that the union of Purusha, consciousness, and Prakriti, nature, is the fundamental cause of all creation. This very principle is extensively explained in Sankhya philosophy, as structured by Maharishi Kapila, who classified 25 fundamental elements, tattvas, that govern existence. Although Sankhya and Vedanta may appear different, their roots lie in the same Vedic tradition, from which all Indian philosophies have evolved. Science seeks to understand how matter came into existence, but Sankhya and the Vedas explore the relationship between matter and consciousness. Science proves that the universe is composed of energy. But Sankhya and the Vedas inquire, who governs this energy, and what is its ultimate truth? If science seeks to understand the process of creation, the Vedas and Sankhya reveal the true nature and purpose of existence. According to Sankhya Darshan, the universe is formed by the union of Prakriti and Purusha. Prakriti is inert, achetan, and functions solely through its three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Purusha is conscious, Chetan, the unchanging witness of all creation. This dual principle is repeatedly emphasized in the Upanishads and Vedas. While Vedanta asserts that Atman, the Self, and Brahman, the Absolute, are one, Advat or non-duality, Sankhya maintains that Prakriti and Purusha are distinct yet inseparably linked, Dvaita or dualism. The journey of science and the Vedas is not limited to the search for matter, but extends to the discovery of consciousness. Even modern quantum physics has now revealed that matter and energy originate from the void and dissolve back into it. This truth was already proclaimed in the Vedas. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma, the entire universe emerges from Brahman and ultimately merges back into it. Sankhya, Vedas, Upanishads, and modern science, a unified search for truth. Thus, it would not be incorrect to say that the Vedas, Upanishads, Sankhya philosophy, and modern science are all engaged in the search for the same ultimate truth, only their perspectives and methods differ. Science seeks to understand reality through experimentation and observation, whereas the Vedas and Sankhya philosophy facilitate the realization of truth through meditation, spiritual practice, and inner insight. In the end, truth remains one, whether expressed in the language of science, Vedic hymns, or the profound principles of Sankhya Darshan. It is commonly believed that Sankhya is an independent, rational system, yet its roots lie deeply embedded in the Vedas and Upanishads. This eternal wisdom eventually took the form of Sankhya philosophy. Unlike Advait Vedanta, which is primarily faith-based, Sankhya is founded on logic, experience, and self-inquiry. It observes that the universe consists of two fundamental principles, Purusha, consciousness, and Prakriti, nature. Purusha is pure consciousness, the passive witness. Prakriti is dynamic and ever-changing, responsible for all activity in the world. All movement and transformation belong to Prakriti, yet when Purusha falsely identifies with it, bondage arises. This misidentification is the root of ignorance, and liberation, moksha, becomes possible only when the soul realizes that it is beyond this transient world. The philosophy of Maharishi Kapila, the founder of Sankhya, stands as a pinnacle of Indian intellectual tradition. It is a path that separates the soul from nature through pure knowledge without any external rituals or dogma. It is a journey of wisdom, logic, and discernment that leads directly to freedom from worldly attachment. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna extols the greatness of this knowledge, stating that one who follows the path of Sankhya attains self-realization and transcends the illusions of the world. Sankhya asserts that the universe is composed of only two elements, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha, or the soul, is pure consciousness, inactive, and merely a witness. Prakriti, or nature, is constantly in motion, where change is the only permanence. Liberation, moksha, occurs when the soul disentangles itself from this ever-changing world and realizes its true nature. This understanding is not just intellectual, it is an experiential awakening that dissolves all illusions. However, Sankhya is not merely a theoretical philosophy, it is a science of life, soul, and the universe itself. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna integrates Sankhya with Karma Yoga, making it even more practical. He explains that realization alone is not enough. Selfless action, nishkama karma, is also a path to liberation. Bondage arises not from action itself, but from attachment to action. This is why the Gita serves as a bridge between Sankhya and Yoga, merging wisdom and action into two complementary aspects of the same truth. This profound realization was also echoed by Buddha, who proclaimed that the world is full of suffering, dukkha, and its root cause is craving, trishna, and attachment, moha. When attachment ceases, the mind is liberated, leading to nirvana. But what is nirvana? It is the very state in which the soul becomes free from the bondage of Prakriti, where neither attachment nor fear remains, only pure awareness. The Jain tradition also expresses this same eternal truth in its own way. It considers the soul to be infinite, pure, and inherently free, but covered by layers of karma. When these karmic layers dissolve, the soul recognizes its true essence and attains siddhud, liberation. This is precisely what Sankhya refers to as viveka, discriminative wisdom, the ability to discern between the eternal soul and the transient world. It is this awareness that liberates the soul, leading it beyond the cycle of birth and death. Sankhya, the universal path to self-realization. Truth is one, yet the paths to attain it may vary. One who follows the path of Sankhya dispels darkness through the light of knowledge. One who walks the path of yoga realizes the Brahman within through meditation and spiritual practice. One who embraces Vedanta understands that the soul, Atman, and the ultimate reality, Brahman, are one. One who treads the path of the Buddha attains nirvana through right vision, right resolve, and right meditation. One who follows the Jain ascetic path reaches the same truth through self-restraint and penance. However, truth is not merely something to be read in scriptures, it must be personally experienced. Liberation, moksha, is not found outside, it lies within you. Do not search for it in books, external means, or even the words of a guru. It can only be realized within. When you understand that you exist beyond this world, when you awaken to the fact that you are merely a witness, only then is true liberation possible. This is the message of Sankhya, the essence of the Gita, and the ultimate conclusion of all philosophies. Sankhya's influence beyond India. The wisdom of Maharishi Kapila was not confined to India alone. Rather, it spread widely across the world. His Sankhya philosophy became not only the foundation of Indian spiritual and philosophical traditions, but it also found resonance in various other cultures. This knowledge was never limited to one place, it became part of the global consciousness. Many scholars translated and interpreted Kapila's teachings, and elements of Sankhya philosophy can be found in China, Tibet, Japan, and Greece. With the expansion of Buddhism, the teachings of Sankhya also reached various parts of Asia. Tibetan scriptures bear clear influences of Sankhya thought. Even in Greek philosophy, glimpses of Sankhya principles can be observed in the works of Plato and Pythagoras. This suggests that Sankhya's wisdom transcended geographical and cultural boundaries. The Greek concept of dualism, the distinction between mind and matter, bear similarities to Sankhya's Purusha and Prakriti duality. Furthermore, UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, has recognized Sankhya philosophy as one of the most significant intellectual traditions of humanity. Sankhya's scientific depth has earned it a place among the most influential philosophical systems in human history. UNESCO's archives list it among the greatest contributions to human thought. Sankhya, a beacon of universal wisdom. Sankhya is not just a theoretical doctrine, it is the revelation of the ultimate truth of the cosmos. It is a lighthouse that guides all of humanity toward self-realization. It is not merely a heritage of Indian culture, but a priceless gift to the entire world. The wisdom of Maharishi Kapila has stood the test of time, remaining as relevant today as it was in the past, and it will continue to illuminate the path of future generations. This is the essence of Sankhya, the path to self-awareness, and the key to ultimate liberation. Sankhya proves that the soul's freedom and the attainment of moksha are not confined to any single tradition, they are a universal truth for all awakened beings. The Indian sages called it moksha, but it is not just a word, it is an experience, a realization of truth. Just as flowing water eventually merges into the ocean, so too does the soul strive to reach its ultimate truth. This inquiry is not limited to India alone, it has echoed across the world. Western philosophers have also pondered this question, though their answers and paths may have differed. Yet, in the end, the pursuit of truth remains universal. Ancient Greek sage Plato said that this world is merely a shadow, an illusion, and the real truth is that which is permanent beyond change. Is this not the same idea that we call Maya in Indian philosophy? Socrates said, "Know thyself," and consider this the key to liberation. This is the same self-realization that resonates in the Upanishads as Aham Brahmasmi. Aristotle described life as a process of attaining completeness where the soul reaches its highest state. The concept of liberation existed in the West as well, though there it pointed towards an external truth rather than self-realization. In Christianity, liberation is attained only through God's grace, where the soul experiences eternal bliss in heaven. In Islam, it is called Najat, which means living according to the will of God and attaining divine bliss after death. In the modern era, the definition of liberation has become even more complex. Now, more than liberation from the cycle of birth and death, man seeks mental peace. Nietzsche said that man does not need an ultimate truth, he must create his own path. He introduced the concept of the Übermensch, where an individual frees himself from his own limitations. However, this was not the liberation of the soul, but rather the freedom of the ego. Sartre, through existentialism, stated that life has no predetermined meaning. Man creates his own meaning. This thought is not very different from Indian Advait philosophy, except that in it, human freedom replaces the concept of the Supreme Being. When we explore the meaning of liberation in modern psychology, Carl Jung tells us that liberation means recognizing the unconscious truth hidden within oneself. He called this process individuation, where a person acknowledges and integrates their inner darkness, moving towards wholeness. Is this not the same path that is attained through meditation and self-knowledge? Modern science also acknowledges that the entire universe is a play of energy. Quantum physics states that no particle exists in a definite state until it is observed. This is exactly what Sankhya philosophy states, that until consciousness, Purusha, observes Prakriti, it has no fixed form. This philosophy proves that the freedom of the soul is not limited to any particular doctrine, but is a universal principle of existence. It is not merely a theoretical concept, but an experience that every individual can realize within themselves. No matter in which culture one is born, no matter in which language one seeks this truth, ultimately, everyone's journey is towards this very liberation, which transcends all places and times. This is the eternal truth. This is the ultimate goal of life. The Triguna theory of Sankhya philosophy is not only significant from a spiritual perspective, but also provides deep insight into modern psychology. This theory attempts to explain that our consciousness and our mental and physical behaviors are influenced by three qualities: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattva is considered a symbol of peace, balance, knowledge, and purity. It enhances mental clarity and positivity, inspiring a person towards truth, compassion, and spirituality. Rajas represents energy, activity, ambition, and transformation. It motivates a person to act in the world, but also generates desires, restlessness, and instability. Tamas symbolize inertia, laziness, ignorance, and darkness. It keeps a person in a state of inactivity and illusion, obstructing mental and spiritual growth. If we examine this Triguna theory from the perspective of modern psychology, we find that Sattva is linked to a positive mindset and self-awareness, Rajas to activity and the pace of life, and Tamas to mental depression, laziness, and negativity. Western psychology also acknowledges the idea that a person's mental state depends on the balance of various tendencies working within them. If a person has a dominant Sattva, they will remain calm and balanced. If Rajas is predominant, they will be active but restless. And if Tamas prevails, they will be trapped in inertia and negativity. Therefore, the process of increasing Sattva through meditation and yoga is considered the best path for self-development. However, the most important question that arises is, what is moksha? Is it merely freedom, or is it merging into the Supreme? This question cannot be answered externally for any seeker. It is purely a matter of personal experience. When a seeker delves deep within through meditation and self-exploration, they realize that moksha is neither just freedom nor merely merging. It is an experience beyond logic. If a soul desires to see itself as independent, then for it, moksha is liberation from the bonds of nature. But if one wishes to dissolve their identity and become one with the entire universe, then the path of yoga can lead them to that supreme state. Both are true. Both are different paths. It depends on the seeker's perspective as to which path they choose to follow. Maharishi Kapila, through his profound contemplation and meditation, systematically presented the ultimate cosmic truth, which we now know as Sankhya philosophy. It is not just a philosophical ideology, but a scientific explanation of the fundamental laws of existence. This knowledge, manifested from the cosmic sound, reached the sages through the oral tradition and was later systematically presented by Maharishi Kapila in the form of philosophy. Sankhya philosophy is an ancient wisdom that deeply explains the mysteries of creation, clarifying the fundamental elements upon which the universe is based. Its core foundation rests on two principal elements, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha, meaning the soul or pure consciousness, is neither born nor destroyed. It remains merely as a witness, uninvolved in any action, only observing and experiencing. In contrast, Prakriti is the mother of all creation, responsible for all the movements and transformations in the world. It is composed of the three Gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And based on their balance and imbalance, the entire creation and its functioning are determined. The idea in Sankhya philosophy that the soul, Purusha, while being inactive, merely observes the actions of nature, Prakriti, natural energy, aligns with the principles of modern quantum physics. Scientists have discovered that until a particle is observed, it remains in a wave state, but as soon as it is observed, it stabilizes into a particle form. This is exactly what Sankhya states, that until Purusha perceives Prakriti, it remains mere energy, but when Purusha's gaze falls upon it, it manifests as the tangible world. In this way, both modern science and ancient Indian philosophy agree that consciousness is what gives shape to reality. Therefore, if consciousness recognizes its true nature, it can free itself from the bonds of the material world. This is the process of moksha. And this knowledge cannot be obtained from any external scripture or teaching. It is an experiential truth that can only be understood by turning inward. This was the message of Maharishi Kapila. This is the teaching of the Vedantins. And this is what modern scientists are gradually beginning to acknowledge. Truth, regardless of the form in which it appears, remains eternal, indestructible, and universal. Just as modern science states that the entire universe is composed of energy and matter, and energy is in a constant state of transformation, similarly, Sankhya philosophy states that creation arises from the combination of the three gunas of Prakriti. Sattva represents peace and balance, Rajas is the source of motion and action, and Tamas provides inertia and stability. If we examine the principles of physics, Newton's law of motion states that an object remains at rest until an external force acts upon it. This is characteristic of Tamas. However, when force is applied, the object moves, which is the effect of Rajas. And when this motion reaches a state of equilibrium, Sattva becomes dominant. Similarly, according to quantum physics, until a particle is observed, it exists in a wave state, but once it is observed, it manifests as a particle. This is exactly what Sankhya philosophy states, that until consciousness, Purusha, perceives Prakriti, it has no definite form. This principle of Sankhya is not only useful in understanding the physical world, but also has a profound impact on the mental and spiritual levels. From a psychological perspective, we find that Sattva is associated with a positive mindset, self-awareness, and peace. Rajas is related to activity, ambition, and restlessness, while Tamas is linked to mental inertia, depression, and laziness. This is why the process of increasing Sattva through meditation and yoga is considered the best path for self-development. Today, psychologists also consider meditation and self-analysis to be among the most effective methods for attaining mental peace. If consciousness recognizes its true nature, it can free itself from the bonds of the material world. This is the process of moksha, and this knowledge cannot be obtained from any external scripture or teaching. It is purely a matter of experience. Moksha is not merely about reaching another realm after death, but it can be attained in this very life when the soul realizes that it is separate from the body and mind. Sankhya philosophy teaches us that the soul and nature are two distinct entities. The soul is a non-doer, merely a witness, while nature is constantly changing and drives all actions. Maharishi Kapila presented this truth in an organized form and made it the foundation of Sankhya philosophy. It is not just a philosophical ideology, but a scientific explanation of the fundamental laws of existence. This philosophy clarifies that the soul is eternal, pure, and indestructible, whereas nature is ever-changing and temporary. When the soul separates itself from nature, it recognizes its true form, and this is the state of moksha. This is why in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna also described the greatness of Sankhya Yoga, stating that one who attains this knowledge can be freed from the bonds of the material world. He also made it clear that both knowledge and action are means to liberation, but action can only be free from bondage when performed selflessly. This is the remarkable union of Sankhya and Karma Yoga. Buddhist and Jain philosophies also presented many of the principles of Sankhya in their own ways. Buddha said that the world is full of suffering, and the cause of this suffering is our craving. When this craving ceases, when the mind is freed from the bonds of the world, then nirvana is attained. What is this nirvana? It is the same state where the soul is freed from the bonds of nature and only pure consciousness remains. This is exactly what Sankhya philosophy also states, that the soul is free but appears bound due to ignorance. Jain philosophy presents the same truth in its own way. There, the soul is eternal, pure, and free but is covered by the veil of karma. When this karma is destroyed, when the soul recognizes its pure form, only then can it attain the Siddh state. This is the same knowledge that Sankhya calls Viveka, the discriminative wisdom that separates the soul from nature. Thus, whether it is the path of Sankhya, the discipline of yoga, the Advait principle of Vedanta, the nirvana of the Buddhists, or the karma shading process of the Jains, the ultimate goal is the same. Truth is one, only the paths to attain it are different. Some attain it through knowledge, some through meditation, some through selfless action, and some through discipline and penance. But the journey to liberation is not external. It is an inward journey. It cannot be found in books or external sources. It can only be attained by delving deep within oneself. The knowledge propounded by Maharishi Kapila not only became the foundation of Indian philosophy, but also influenced other philosophical traditions worldwide. Elements of Sankhya philosophy can be seen in the thoughts of Plato and Pythagoras, proving that this knowledge transcended geographical boundaries. The influence of Sankhya is also evident in Tibetan scriptures. Moreover, UNESCO has recognized Sankhya philosophy as one of the most important texts in the world. It has been ranked among the most influential philosophical thoughts of humanity. Thus, it becomes clear that the invaluable knowledge given by Maharishi Kapila is not just a philosophical doctrine, but a science of the liberation of the soul. It teaches humanity that beyond the bonds of the body, mind, and the world, we are a free consciousness. As soon as this knowledge awakens within us, we become truly liberated. This is the real message of Sankhya, the essence of the Gita, and the ultimate conclusion of all philosophies. Sankhya philosophy teaches us that the soul and nature are two distinct entities. The soul is inherently free, inactive, and pure consciousness, whereas nature, despite being inert, is constantly changing. This distinction is not only philosophically valid, but also scientifically supported. Modern science acknowledges that any object remains at rest until acted upon by an external force. This principle applies to nature as well. It functions according to its inherent properties. But when consciousness, Purusha, observes it, it comes into motion. The most beautiful example of this is the observer effect, which suggests that consciousness itself makes this world perceivable. Just as the position of a particle is determined only when it is measured, Sankhya philosophy also states that the entire creation is made up of the elements of nature, but without consciousness, Purusha, it is lifeless. The mere presence of Purusha regulates the movements of Prakriti. If Purusha turns away from Prakriti, then this world becomes meaningless. This principle needs to be applied in our lives as well. A person remains entangled in problems as long as he considers himself a part of nature. But as soon as he realizes that he is beyond the body, mind, and world, merely a witness, his worries disappear. This realization itself is moksha. Liberation is not just a state attained after death, but something that is possible in this very life when a person sees himself as separate from nature. This philosophy also teaches us that the ultimate purpose of life is to recognize this freedom of the soul. It teaches that while we remain engaged in the activities of nature, we are not bound by them. It is similar to an actor performing on stage who knows that he is only playing a role and is not actually the character he portrays. If we also see this world as a stage and experience ourselves merely as witnesses, we can remain free even while living in the world. This knowledge takes us beyond all sorrows, and this is true liberation. Thus, Sankhya philosophy is not just an ideology but a way of living. It tells us that until we recognize our true nature, we continue to live in illusion. But the moment we realize that we are not part of this perishable world, but beyond it, we attain true peace and freedom. This is the ultimate goal of Sankhya, the essence of knowledge, and the highest achievement of life. Sankhya philosophy is a unique gift of Indian thought, which is not just a subject of philosophical discourse, but a means to reveal the profound mysteries of life and existence. It is not merely a chain of logical arguments and ideas, but a practical guide that leads an individual towards self-knowledge and liberation. The foundation of this philosophy rests onto fundamental principles: Purusha, consciousness, and Prakriti, the material world. Purusha is inactive, pure, and merely a witness, whereas Prakriti is ever-changing and dynamic. Their relationship is like that of the sun and the moon, where the sun is self-luminous, while the moon merely reflects the sun's light. Modern science presents a similar perspective. According to scientific research, the entire universe is composed of energy, and this energy manifests in different forms to create matter. Just as physics states that every object vibrates with energy, Sankhya philosophy states that the entire creation is the result of three fundamental energies: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. If we take the example of light, we find that the rays emitted by the sun have different wavelengths. Some make light visible, Sattva Guna. Some provide heat, Rajas Guna. And some infrared rays remain invisible, Tamas Guna. Science believes that every particle vibrates at a certain frequency, and its form changes according to circumstances. Einstein's famous equation, E is equal to mc superscript 2, demonstrates the truth that matter and energy are essentially one and the same. Matter can be converted into energy, and energy can be transformed back into matter. This is exactly what Sankhya philosophy states, that Prakriti, nature, is the foundation of all creation and manifests in different forms through the interplay of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. If we examine the nuclear reactions occurring in the sun, we find that hydrogen atoms collide and convert into energy, which then reaches Earth in the form of light and heat. The same principle operates in an atomic bomb. A tiny atom holds an immense amount of energy capable of destroying an entire city. Today, science has validated the Big Bang theory, which states that the universe originated from an extremely dense point of energy. Scientists believe that, in its earliest state, the universe existed in an extremely condensed form, where all matter and energy were concentrated in a singular point. A sudden explosion forced it to expand, eventually leading to the formation of galaxies, stars, and planets. Sankhya philosophy conveys a similar idea, that creation emerged from Prakriti, which was initially in a state of equilibrium. However, when this balance was disturbed, the process of creation began. Science states that in the initial moments of the universe, only energy existed, which later condensed into matter. Likewise, Sankhya explains that as long as the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, remain balanced, the world remains unmanifest. But when a disturbance occurs, the process of creation unfolds. Quantum physics presents the fascinating concept of the observer effect. Scientists discovered that until a particle is observed, it behaves like a wave of energy, but the moment it is measured or observed, it transforms into a particle. This concept aligns directly with Sankhya's Purusha Sakshi principle. Sankhya asserts that Purusha, consciousness, does nothing on its own, it remains a mere witness. However, its mere presence is enough to set the entire activity of Prakriti into motion. When scientists studied the behavior of electrons, they found that when no one attempts to observe them, they exist as a wave. But when an observer tries to measure them, they transform into a particle. This is precisely what Sankhya philosophy teaches, that the soul, while remaining inactive, still influences all events in the world. Similarly, science differentiates between conscious and non-conscious matter. Conscious entities include living beings with decision-making abilities, such as humans, animals, and plants. Non-conscious matter consists of inanimate objects that cannot make decisions on their own, such as stones, metals, and water. Sankhya philosophy also makes this distinction clear. Purusha, soul, is conscious, whereas Prakriti, nature, is inert. Nature functions purely by its inherent properties, but it is the presence of Purusha that allows for the experience of consciousness. If we look at a robot or a computer, we find that they can store information, perform calculations, and carry out complex tasks. However, they lack independent intelligence. They operate only according to programmed instructions. In contrast, humans possess consciousness, which enables them to think, make decisions, and act independently. This consciousness is the essence of Purusha, while the mechanical operation of a computer is analogous to Prakriti's inert nature. Ultimately, we arrive at the conclusion that both science and philosophy share the same purpose: to seek the truth about the universe and existence. Both acknowledge that the world is not merely composed of matter, but that there is a deeper consciousness at work behind it. Science attempts to understand this truth through modern tools, experiments, and calculations, while ancient Indian sages realized it thousands of years ago through meditation, spiritual practices, and inner wisdom. This truth can only be fully grasped through the combined insights of both science and philosophy. A fundamental question arises here: are modern science and ancient spirituality viewing the same truth from different perspectives? Science attempts to understand matter externally, while spirituality provides the means to experience it internally. Yet, the ultimate goal of both is the same: the search for truth. Sankhya philosophy teaches us that the soul and nature are two distinct elements. The soul is independent, inactive, and pure consciousness, whereas nature, though inert, is constantly changing. This distinction is not only philosophically significant, but also scientifically validated. Modern science also asserts that any object remains at rest unless acted upon by an external force. The same principle applies to nature. It functions according to its inherent properties, but when consciousness, Purusha, observes it, it comes into motion. The most beautiful example of this is the observer effect, which suggests that consciousness makes this world perceptible. Just as the presence of a particle is determined only when it is measured, Sankhya philosophy states that the entire creation is composed of nature's elements, but without consciousness, Purusha, it remains lifeless. The mere presence of Purusha regulates the movements of nature. If Purusha turns away from nature, this world becomes meaningless. This principle must also be applied to our lives. A person remains entangled in problems as long as they consider themselves a part of nature. But as soon as one realizes that they are beyond the body, mind, and world, merely a witness, all worries vanish. This realization is liberation, not a state attained after death, but something achievable in this life when one sees oneself as separate from nature. This philosophy also teaches us that the fundamental purpose of life is to recognize the soul's independence. It shows that we remain engaged in nature's activities, but are not bound by them. It is like an actor performing on stage while knowing they're merely playing a role and not actually the character. If we perceive the world as a stage and ourselves as mere witnesses, we can be free while still living in it. This knowledge transcends all sorrows and is the true liberation. Thus, Sankhya philosophy is not just an ideology but a way of life. It teaches that until we recognize our true nature, we live in illusion. But the moment we realize that we are not a part of this transient world, but beyond it, we attain true peace and freedom. This is the ultimate goal of Sankhya, the essence of wisdom and the highest achievement in life. Sankhya philosophy is an invaluable gift of Indian wisdom, not merely a subject of philosophy, but a medium to uncover the profound mysteries of life and existence. It is not just a chain of reasoning and thoughts, but a practical guide that leads a person towards self-realization and liberation. This philosophy is based on two fundamental elements: Purusha, consciousness, and Prakriti, the material world. Purusha is inactive, pure, and merely a witness, whereas Prakriti is constantly changing and active. Their relationship is like that of the sun and the moon. The sun is self-luminous, while the moon only reflects its light. Modern science presents a similar perspective. According to scientific research, the entire universe is composed of energy, which transforms into different forms to create matter. Just as physics states that every object vibrates at a certain frequency, Sankhya philosophy explains that the entire creation is a result of three types of energy: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. If we take the example of light, we find that the rays emitted by the sun exist in different wavelengths. Some make light visible, Sattva. Some provide heat, Rajas. And some infrared rays are invisible, Tamas. Science accepts that every particle vibrates at a particular frequency and changes form based on circumstances. Einstein's famous equation E is equal to mc superscript 2 illustrates the truth that matter and energy are fundamentally the same. Matter can be converted into energy and vice versa. This is precisely what Sankhya philosophy states, that nature is the root of all creation, and it takes different forms due to the interplay of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. If we look at the nuclear reactions in the sun, we find that hydrogen atoms collide and transform into energy, which reaches Earth as light and heat. The same principle operates in an atomic bomb. A tiny atom contains enough energy to destroy an entire city. Today, science has proven through the Big Bang theory that the universe originated from the explosion of an extremely dense point of energy. Scientists believe that the universe was once in a highly condensed state, where all matter and energy existed in an extremely dense form. A sudden explosion caused its expansion, resulting in galaxies, stars, and planets. Sankhya philosophy also states that creation originates from nature, which initially remains in a balanced state. However, when this equilibrium is disturbed, creation begins to expand. Science says that in the early moments of the universe, only energy existed, which gradually condensed into matter. Similarly, Sankhya states that as long as the three qualities of nature remain balanced, the world remains unmanifested. But as soon as imbalance occurs, creation begins. In quantum physics, the observer effect is a remarkable principle. Scientists have discovered that until a particle is observed, it behaves like an energy wave. But as soon as one attempts to measure or observe it, it transforms into a particle. This principle directly aligns with the Sankhya philosophy of the Purusha Sakshi concept. Sankhya asserts that Purusha, consciousness, does nothing but merely remains as a witness. Yet, its mere presence causes all actions of Prakriti. When scientists studied the behavior of electrons, they found that when no one observes them, they exist as a wave. But when someone attempts to observe them, they change into a particle. Sankhya philosophy similarly states that the soul remains inactive yet influences all occurrences in this world. Science also differentiates between conscious and inert matter. Conscious matter possesses life and decision-making abilities, such as humans, animals, and plants. inert matter lacks independent decision-making capabilities, such as stones, metals, and water. Sankhya philosophy also clearly distinguishes between the two. Purusha, soul, is conscious, while Prakriti, nature, is inert. Nature functions naturally, but it is only because of Purusha's presence that it exhibits awareness. If we observe robots or computers, we find that they can store information, compute, and perform complex tasks. However, they lack independent intelligence and operate solely based on given instructions. Humans possess consciousness, enabling them to think, decide, and act independently. This consciousness is the essence of Purusha, and inertia is the essence of Prakriti. Ultimately, we conclude that both science and philosophy seek the same truth, the fundamental nature of the universe and existence. Both acknowledge that the world is not just composed of matter, but is governed by a deeper consciousness. Science attempts to understand this truth through modern tools, experiments, and calculations, whereas Indian sages realized it thousands of years ago through meditation, self-discipline, and inner insight. This truth can be fully understood only through the union of science and philosophy. Here, an important question arises: are modern science and ancient spirituality observing the same truth from different perspectives? Science tries to understand matter externally, while spirituality seeks to experience it internally. Both share the same goal, the quest for truth. As we try to comprehend this profound mystery, we realize that science and spirituality are not contradictory but complementary. Science teaches us how the universe functions, whereas spirituality helps us understand its purpose. This is the essence of Sankhya philosophy, the path to understanding the mysteries of science and consciousness and realizing the soul's independence. Sankhya philosophy makes it clear that the relationship between the soul and Brahman is not just a matter of logic, but an experiential reality. When the soul experiences itself beyond the material world, it recognizes its independent existence. Vedanta acknowledges the non-duality of the soul and Brahman, whereas Sankhya establishes the soul's independent existence. It balances between dualism and non-dualism, considering Purusha and Prakriti separate, yet interdependent. Yoga bridges this gap, asserting that through meditation and practice, the soul can attain the state of Brahman. Sankhya philosophy answers this profound question of what liberation, moksha, means for a human being, freedom or merging. This question is not just a matter of logic, but of the seeker's experience. If a soul sees itself as separate from nature, it moves toward freedom. If it sees itself as one with the entire universe, it moves toward merging. This is why the concept of liberation is explained in different ways in Indian philosophy. Sankhya states that the soul was, is, and will always be free. It only appears to be bound due to ignorance. When it gains knowledge that it is beyond nature, it establishes itself in its original state. Yoga states that the soul and the Supreme Soul are not separate, but through meditation and spiritual practice, the soul recognizes its divine nature and merges with it. Even in modern life, this question remains just as relevant. The more humans are drawn toward material comforts, the more they experience mental stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. External achievements may bring temporary satisfaction, but inner peace can only be attained through self-realization and expansion of consciousness. Yoga and meditation are the paths to understanding this truth. When a person meditates, they transcend their thoughts, desires, and ego to experience their true state. They realize that they are neither the body nor the mind, but pure consciousness that exists beyond nature. Sankhya philosophy also makes it clear that a person can move toward liberation through their actions. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna compares Sankhya and Karma Yoga, stating that knowledge alone is not enough, selfless action is equally important. When a person acts without attachment to the results, they remain free from bondage even while living in the world. This is similar to how a lotus flower remains untouched by the water in which it grows. If we look at modern science, the principles of quantum physics align with the Sankhya philosophy of Purusha and Prakriti. Science states that everything in the universe is made of energy, which functions in the form of vibrations. Sankhya philosophy presents the same idea, stating that the entire creation is made of the threefold nature Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Modern scientists also believe that the structure of the universe is influenced by some form of consciousness. The observer effect in quantum physics proves that until a particle is observed, it exists in a wave-like state, but as soon as it is measured, it manifests as a particle. This corresponds with the Sankhya philosophy's Purusha Sakshi principle, which states that Purusha does nothing itself, but its mere presence activates nature. Today, humans are using science and technology to understand and modify the laws of nature. Discoveries in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration have given them the power to alter the structure of nature. But the question is whether this is about changing nature's laws or simply understanding and utilizing them. Sankhya philosophy makes it clear that humans cannot completely change the laws of nature, but they can become co-creators. They can gain knowledge of these laws and shape their lives accordingly. If we understand this with a simple example, a seed has the potential to become a tree, but until it gets the right environment, water, and sunlight, it remains dormant. The power to become a tree is inherent in the seed, but this power is activated only when favorable conditions are met. Similarly, the soul has infinite power, but until it recognizes itself, it remains bound by the laws of nature. So now the question arises, is liberation, moksha, merely a concept, or can it be experienced? In reality, liberation is not something external, but an inner realization. When a seeker dives within, when they attempt to know themselves through meditation and self-inquiry, they experience that they were always free. It was only ignorance that made them feel bound to the world. As soon as this knowledge awakens, they become free from the bondage of the material world. Thus, liberation can be both freedom and merging. It depends on the seeker's perspective and experience. If a soul considers itself a part of cosmic consciousness, it can attain liberation through the path of yoga and devotion. If a soul sees itself as independent, it can progress towards liberation through the path of Sankhya. Both paths are true because truth is not singular, but is based on each seeker's individual experience. Therefore, the real question is not what liberation is, but how a person experiences it. Liberation can be experienced even while living in the world if one sees oneself merely as a witness. This is the message of Sankhya, the truth of the Gita, and the ultimate conclusion of all philosophies. For those who want to understand Sankhya philosophy in depth, this section includes questions commonly asked in civil services, UGC NET, QET PG, and other competitive exams. The answers will be simple, clear, and logical so that you can easily understand them and use them in your studies. Question: what are the similarities between Sankhya philosophy and modern scientific theories? And how do they explain the origin of the universe and the nature of consciousness? Answer: both Sankhya philosophy and modern science attempt to explain the fundamental laws of the universe's origin and existence. The famous scientific equation E is equal to mc superscript 2, proposed by Albert Einstein, demonstrates that matter and energy are essentially the same and can transform into one another. This is similar to the Sankhya philosophy, which states that the entire creation is formed by the combination of the three Gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, and continuously manifests in different forms over time. If we observe nuclear reactions in the sun, hydrogen atoms collide and transform into energy, which reaches Earth in the form of light and heat. Similarly, in an atomic bomb, the energy contained within extremely minute particles is released, producing immense destructive power. These phenomena prove the deep connection between energy and matter, something that Sankhya philosophy had already explained thousands of years ago. Modern science, through the Big Bang theory, proves that the universe originated from the explosion of an extremely dense point of energy. This theory states that in the beginning, all matter and energy were in an extremely compressed state, and then, due to a massive explosion, they began to expand, forming galaxies, stars, and planets. Sankhya philosophy also states that the creation of the universe occurs due to the disturbance of the balance of nature. As long as the three qualities of nature, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, remain in balance, the universe remains unmanifested. But when this balance is disturbed, the universe begins to expand. The observer effect in quantum physics also aligns with the principles of Sankhya philosophy. Scientists have found that as long as a particle is not observed, it behaves like an energy wave. But as soon as it is observed, it manifests as a definite particle. This is the same principle described in Sankhya philosophy as Purusha Sakshi, the witnessing consciousness. Sankhya states that Purusha, consciousness, does nothing by itself. It remains a mere witness, but its mere presence causes all the activities of nature to take place. Similarly, science distinguishes between conscious and inert matter. Conscious matter includes living beings that have the ability to make decisions, such as humans, animals, and plants. Inert matter consists of objects that cannot make decisions on their own, such as stones, metals, and water. Sankhya philosophy also clarifies this distinction. Purusha, the soul, is conscious, while Prakriti, nature, is inert. Nature functions solely according to its inherent qualities, but it is only due to the presence of Purusha that consciousness is experienced. If we take the example of robots or computers, we find that they can perform complex calculations and tasks, but they lack independent intelligence. They merely follow given instructions. In contrast, humans possess consciousness, enabling them to think freely, make decisions, and take action. This consciousness is the essence of Purusha, while the mechanical nature is the essence of Prakriti. Both modern science and Sankhya philosophy acknowledge the truth that the universe is not merely composed of physical elements, but is driven by a deeper consciousness. Science is attempting to understand this through modern instruments, experiments, and calculations, whereas Indian sages realized it thousands of years ago through meditation, spiritual practice, and inner insight. Thus, we can conclude that the truth is one whether it is expressed in scientific language or explained through Sankhya philosophy. Only through the combination of science and philosophy can the profound mystery of the universe and consciousness be fully understood. What is the place of Sankhya philosophy in Indian philosophy? Sankhya philosophy holds a significant place in Indian philosophy because it is one of the oldest and most logical philosophical systems. It is attributed to Maharishi Kapila and is one of the 6 major philosophical systems, Shad Darshanas, of Indian thought. Sankhya is a knowledge-based and rational system that attempts to explain the mysteries of the universe, the soul, and nature both scientifically and philosophically. The uniqueness of Sankhya philosophy lies in its explanation of creation based on the duality of Purusha, consciousness, and Prakriti, the material world. It does not consider God as an essential factor in creation, but attributes the origin of the universe to the imbalance of the 3 Gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. For this reason, it is considered a theistic independent, atheistic philosophy. However, it accepts the existence of the soul, which differentiates it from Charvaka philosophy. The influence of Sankhya philosophy is not only seen in other Indian philosophical systems such as Yoga, Vedanta, Buddhism, and Jainism, but is also clearly reflected in the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna describes the greatness of Sankhya Yoga. The Yoga philosophy is also based on Sankhya principles, combining the knowledge of Sankhya with the practice of yoga. Sankhya philosophy has deeply impacted Indian spiritual and intellectual traditions. By distinguishing between the soul and nature, it paves the way for liberation and prioritizes logic, experience, and wisdom in understanding the mysteries of life. Thus, within Indian philosophy, Sankhya holds a highly significant and unique position. The special role of Sankhya philosophy in Indian thought. The importance of Sankhya philosophy in Indian philosophy lies in its antiquity, rational analysis, scientific explanation of the relationship between the soul and nature, and its ability to clearly define the path to liberation. It is one of the 6 major Indian philosophical systems, Shad Darshanas, and is believed to have been founded by Maharishi Kapila. Sankhya philosophy is a knowledge and wisdom-based system that seeks to understand creation, the soul, and the universe in a logical manner without religious bias. A key characteristic of Sankhya philosophy is that it does not consider God necessary for the creation of the universe. Instead, it explains creation through the duality of Purusha, consciousness, and Prakriti, the material world. Purusha is pure consciousness, which remains inactive and merely observes, while Prakriti is constantly changing and is responsible for all activities in creation. Prakriti itself consists of the 3 Gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and the imbalance among them leads to the manifestation of the universe. The role of Sankhya in Indian philosophy is also significant due to its scientific outlook. The observer effect in modern physics and quantum theory align with Sankhya's principles regarding the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti. This philosophy not only provides direction to Indian spiritual thought, but also has deep similarities with psychology, yoga, and science. Sankhya's influence extends beyond Vedanta, yoga, Buddhism, and Jainism. It is also prominently present in the Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna presents Sankhya Yoga as a powerful path to liberation. Additionally, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are based on Sankhya principles, emphasizing self-realization through meditation and spiritual practice. Thus, the role of Sankhya in Indian philosophy is not just theoretical or philosophical, but also practical and spiritual. It serves as a means to understand life and the structure of the universe while also guiding the soul toward liberation and moksha. Its dualistic approach establishes a balance between Vedant's non-dualism and yoga's practical path. For this reason, Sankhya philosophy plays a unique and invaluable role in Indian thought and spiritual tradition. Is Sankhya merely a logic-based philosophy, or does it have a scientific foundation? Sankhya philosophy is not just a logic-based philosophical system, it also has a profound scientific foundation. It attempts to explain the structure of the universe, consciousness, and matter through reasoning and analysis. Its primary foundation is dualism, which considers Purusha, consciousness, and Prakriti, the material world, as distinct elements. This perspective aligns with many modern scientific theories, especially in quantum physics and cosmology. According to Sankhya philosophy, the entire universe is composed of the 3 qualities of nature, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. This Trigunatmak theory corresponds to the concepts of energy, motion, and inertia in modern science. In physics, Newton's laws of motion state that an object remains at rest until acted upon by an external force, and once in motion, it continues to move until an external force stops it. This aligns with the qualities of Tamas, inertia, Rajas, motion, and Sattva, balance. Furthermore, Sankhya philosophy states that until Purusha comes into contact with Prakriti, Prakriti remains inactive. This concept aligns with the observer effect in quantum physics, which shows that until a particle is observed or measured, it remains in a wave-like state, but once observed, it appears in a definite position. Similarly, Sankhya asserts that until Purusha, consciousness, observes Prakriti, it remains inactive, but as soon as Purusha is present, the activities of creation begin. In modern cosmology, the Big Bang theory states that the universe originated from an extremely dense and energy-concentrated state, which suddenly expanded. Sankhya philosophy similarly states that in the beginning, Prakriti was in a state of equilibrium, But when it came into contact with Purusha, imbalance occurred, and the process of creation began. This similarity between scientific theory and Sankhya philosophy highlights their mutual alignment. According to Einstein's equation E is equal to mc superscript 2, energy and matter are two forms of the same entity and can transform into each other. Similarly, Sankhya philosophy asserts that the entire universe is formed through various transformations of Prakriti. This explains that the physical world is not merely composed of solid matter, but is the result of constantly changing energy. The psychological basis of Sankhya philosophy is also profound. Its Triguna theory aligns with modern psychology. Sattva represents mental peace, knowledge, and balance. Rajas is associated with desires, activity, and stress, while Tamas signifies inertia, depression, and ignorance. Modern psychology also acknowledges that human brain function is influenced by different mental states and tendencies which determine an individual's behavior and consciousness. Thus, it becomes evident that Sankhya philosophy is not merely a logic-based ideology, but has a strong scientific foundation. This philosophy provides a deep understanding of creation, consciousness, and matter and aligns with many principles of modern science. This is why it should not only be regarded as a philosophical doctrine, but also as a scientific and fundamental truth. Bhagavad Gita has an extremely significant contribution from Sankhya philosophy. In various chapters of the Gita, Lord Krishna teaches Arjuna the principles of Sankhya, guiding him towards self-knowledge and selfless action. The primary objective of the Gita is to make humans aware of the mysteries of life and death, and help them understand the distinction between the soul and the body, which is also the fundamental principle of Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya philosophy is dualistic, accepting Purusha, soul, and Prakriti, material world, as two separate entities. In the Gita, Lord Krishna repeatedly explains to Arjuna that the soul is eternal, indestructible, and pure consciousness, whereas the body is perishable and ever-changing. This idea is directly derived from Sankhya philosophy. The second chapter of the Gita is called Sankhya Yoga, in which Lord Krishna imparts knowledge about the immortality of the soul and the transitory nature of the body. Lord Krishna says, "Na jayate mriyate va kadachan," meaning the soul is neither born nor does it die. It always exists. This corresponds to the concept of Purusha in Sankhya, which is forever inactive, non-doer, and remains merely as a witness. In the Gita, the knowledge path of Sankhya and the path of Karma Yoga are presented as two different ways leading to the same goal. According to Sankhya, knowledge is essential for liberation, because when a person realizes the distinction between the soul and nature, they become free from worldly bondage. The Gita also states that one who knows the soul becomes free from the cycle of birth and death. However, the Gita does not consider the path of knowledge alone as sufficient, but integrates it with Karma Yoga. Krishna says that liberation is not possible through knowledge alone. Rather, by performing selfless actions, one can also attain the pure form of the soul. Thus, the Gita beautifully harmonizes Sankhya and Karma Yoga. Sankhya philosophy describes the three qualities of nature, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, which govern the entire creation. In the Gita, Krishna explains the influence of these three qualities and encourages Arjuna to move towards Sattva. He explains that a person dominated by Tamas remains in ignorance and inertia. One influenced by Rajas is entangled in desires and the fruits of actions, while a person governed by Sattva moves toward knowledge, peace, and liberation. This is also the fundamental idea of Sankhya, which states that liberation is only possible when a person transcends these three qualities of nature and realizes the pure nature of the soul. The greatest contribution of Sankhya to the Bhagavad Gita is that it explains the true nature of the soul and the world using reason and logic. Krishna repeatedly convinces Arjuna through reasoning and knowledge that retreating from war is not appropriate because the body is perishable and the soul can never be destroyed. This is a direct influence of Sankhya philosophy, where the soul is described as always inactive, indestructible, and free. Thus, the influence of Sankhya philosophy in the Bhagavad Gita is extensive. The Gita does not confine Sankhya's principles to mere philosophical discussion, but provides a way to integrate them into practical life. This knowledge is not just for contemplation and reflection, but for leading a balanced life and elevating the soul. This is why the Gita is not just seen as a religious text, but as a philosophy of life where the profound principles of Sankhya are presented in a simple and practical manner. Sankhya philosophy has had a profound impact on other Indian philosophical systems, as it is one of the most ancient and logical schools of Indian thought. Propounded by Maharishi Kapila, this philosophy laid the foundation of Indian ideology and has influenced Vedanta, Yoga, Buddhism, Jainism, and Ayurveda, among others. The influence of Sankhya on Vedanta philosophy is clearly visible. Although Vedanta presents a non-dualistic perspective, it adopts Sankhya's concepts to understand the distinction between the soul, Purusha, and nature, Prakriti. The concept of Brahman and Maya in the Upanishads appears to be inspired by the dualism of Purusha and Prakriti in Sankhya. Particularly in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes Sankhya Yoga as an important path of knowledge that helps in understanding the true nature of the soul and the world. The influence of Sankhya on yoga philosophy is profound. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the dualism of Sankhya and the concept of Vivekakhyati, the process of realizing the distinction between the soul and nature, are explicitly mentioned. The primary objective of yoga is to free the soul from the bondage of nature, which aligns entirely with the liberation doctrine of Sankhya. The meditation and samadhi practices in yoga are based on Sankhya's understanding of the distinction between Purusha and Prakriti, helping an individual detach from the influence of nature. The deep influence of Sankhya philosophy can also be seen in Buddhist and Jain philosophies. Although the Buddhist concept of Anatmavada, no self, differs from the dualism of Purusha and Prakriti in Sankhya, the Buddhist explanations of the impermanence, Anita, of the world and suffering, Dukkvada, are similar to Sankhya's concept of Prakriti. The Buddhist idea of Nirvana and Sankhya's concept of Moksha both are explained as the result of self-realization and the cessation of craving. Similarly, the Jain concept of the distinction between the soul, Jiva, and non-living matter, Ajiva, closely resembles the dualism of Purusha and Prakriti in Sankhya. The Jain philosopher's doctrine of karma and the purification of the soul also align with Sankhya's concept of liberation. Sankhya philosophy has also played a significant role in Ayurveda. In Charka Sanhita and Sushruta Sanhita, the functions of the body, mind, and nature are explained based on Sankhya's Triguna theory, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. In Ayurveda, the body's fundamental humors, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, are also considered to be influenced by the three Gunas of Sankhya. Thus, Sankhya philosophy not only laid the foundation of Indian metaphysics, but also contributed to the development of other philosophical traditions. Its scientific perspective, logical analysis, and principles based on the independence of the soul deeply influenced Indian philosophical thought. Whether it is Vedant's Brahma Vidya, Yoga's practices, Buddhism's Nirvana, Jainism's theory of karma destruction, or Ayurveda's health system, all these have traces of Sankhya philosophy. Why is Sankhya philosophy considered atheistic? Sankhya philosophy is considered atheistic because it does not accept the existence of God and does not acknowledge any divine entity as necessary for the creation, operation, or liberation of the universe. In Indian philosophy, the term atheistic does not mean a rejection of religion or spirituality. Rather, it refers to those schools of thought that do not accept the Vedas and God as the ultimate truth. Sankhya acknowledges the authority of the Vedas but rejects the role of God in the creation and governance of the universe, which is why it is classified as an atheistic philosophy. Sankhya holds that the creation of the universe occurs through the union of Purusha, soul, and Prakriti, primordial matter. According to this philosophy, when the three inherent qualities of Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas are in equilibrium, the universe remains unmanifested. However, when this balance is disturbed, the universe manifests itself. In this process, there is no need for an omnipotent God. Similarly, in Sankhya, the attainment of liberation, moksha, is independent of God. It is achieved through self-knowledge, viveka, which enables a person to discern the distinction between Purusha and Prakriti. In contrast, other philosophies like Vedanta accept God as the primary cause of creation and the guide toward liberation. Sankhya rejects the concept of God primarily because it is a philosophy based entirely on logic, experience, and analysis. It raises fundamental questions. If God is omnipotent and omniscient, why does suffering, injustice, and misery exist in the world? If God created the universe, why was it necessary for him to govern it? Based on such inquiries, Sankhya concludes that the concept of God is unnecessary and that the laws of the universe function naturally. Although Sankhya does not acknowledge God, it still accepts concepts such as the soul, rebirth, karma, and liberation. It considers the soul to be eternal, pure, and non-doer, which only appears to be engaged in actions due to its association with Prakriti. When the soul realizes its distinction from Prakriti, it attains liberation, and no divine intervention is required in this process. Thus, Sankhya philosophy is atheistic in the sense that it does not recognize God, but it remains a deeply spiritual and metaphysical system that views self-realization as the path to liberation. Sankhya and Jain philosophy both consider liberation, moksha, as the ultimate state of the soul, but their perspectives and paths differ. In Sankhya philosophy, moksha is attained when the soul, Purusha, realizes that it is distinct from Prakriti and is not affected by its qualities. This is possible only through knowledge, which is called vivekakhyati. When the soul understands this distinction, that it is separate from actions, senses, mind, and intellect, it becomes free from the bondage of Prakriti and attains complete independence. In Sankhya philosophy, there is no need for any god or external power for liberation. Rather, it is an intellectual and philosophical process. The soul neither goes to any heaven nor merges into any supreme entity. It simply remains independently established in itself. In Jain philosophy, moksha means the soul returning to its pure form, where it is freed from the coverings of karma and attains its eternal, infinite knowledge and blissful state. According to Jain belief, the soul remains bound in the cycle of birth and death due to accumulated karma over countless lifetimes, and when it completely destroys these karmas through discipline, austerity, truth, non-violence, and meditation, it can attain moksha. According to Jain doctrine, the soul is inherently pure, infinite consciousness, and blissful, but due to karmic impurities, it appears otherwise. When this destruction of karma is complete, the soul attains siddhut and enters the state of liberation. Both Sankhya and Jain philosophy consider the independence of the soul as moksha, but their processes differ. In Sankhya, moksha is attained solely through knowledge, whereas Jain philosophy emphasizes knowledge along with asceticism, discipline, and moral living. Jain philosophy prioritizes the purification of the soul and the complete destruction of karma, while Sankhya considers the soul to be inherently pure, only appearing bound due to ignorance of its distinction from Prakriti. In Jain moksha, the soul resides in Siddhaloka, where it is free from birth and death, whereas in Sankhya, the soul does not go anywhere but simply becomes independent by separating itself from Prakriti. Thus, both Sankhya and Jain philosophy accept the liberation of the soul, but their paths are different. Sankhya sees moksha as a philosophical and intellectual process, while Jain philosophy views it as something that can be achieved through moral discipline and ascetic practices. Both philosophies aim for the same goal, the freedom of the soul, but differ in their understanding of its nature and process. So, today we learned that Sankhya philosophy is not just a philosophical ideology, but a scientific and spiritual perspective that reveals the profound secrets of the soul, nature, and consciousness. This philosophy teaches us that understanding the distinction between Purusha and Prakriti is the first step toward liberation. True freedom is attained only when the soul realizes that it is free from the bonds of Prakriti. Modern science, through quantum physics, is trying to understand these mysteries, whereas Maharishi Kapila had already revealed this truth thousands of years ago. This philosophy does not confine us merely to logic and contemplation, but also provides practical guidance to help us balance our lives and move towards self-realization. So, is Sankhya just a logic-based philosophy, or does it have a scientific foundation? Is it limited only to Indian knowledge traditions, or can its echoes be heard across the world? What is your opinion? What do you think about this philosophy? Be sure to comment. If you like this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon so that you continue to receive such insightful presentations from us. Stay connected in this divine journey where logic and self-realization come together. Thank you.